Hey guys, welcome to another tutorial here at tylerduprey.com. Today we're going to be making buttons, particularly buttons that are interactive. And so when a user clicks on these buttons, we want to create some kind of, we want to simulate some kind of haptic feedback to show the user that the button is being clicked. And so we want it to look like it's being pressed down on the page. And it just creates like a nice user experience so that your users know that the button's working and that it's being clicked. And so this is a part of a larger design concept that Google released back in 2014 called material design. And the idea behind material design is that all your elements on the page are like a physical thing that sits on top of the page, and when a user presses it, it reacts accordingly, and so it reacts as if it is a material on the page. And so that's what we're going to be doing here, and yeah, we're going to be doing that, but with using CSS and particularly box shadow, as well as changing some background colors and things like that. So hopefully you guys get something out of this, but without further ado, let's just jump in. Okay, so I'm here in CodePen. If you guys don't have a CodePen account, you can create a free account at codepen.io. So go ahead and do that. Create a new pin, which is what I've done here. I'm going to jump into the HTML and I'm going to go ahead and get started. First thing I'm going to do is create a container class. It's a page wrap div. That's going to kind of hold everything inside of our page. And then inside of that, I'm actually going to create a container here to hold our buttons. And so let's create some buttons. Actually, the first button I'm going to make is an href. I'm sorry, an anchor tag. And I'm going to give it the class button, btn. And then I'm going to create a button element. And the idea here is sometimes you're going to want your buttons to be links, and sometimes you're going to want them to be button elements. But we want them to look the same. If we can create uniformity on our website as much as possible without having all kinds of different styles for different elements, it's going to be easier for the user. We just want them to know that these are both clickable buttons. So we want them to look the same even though they're different elements. So for this one, let's just put in text for start tutorial. That'll be a button to a tutorial. And then this could be a button for playing a video or something like that. Okay, so let's jump in here to our CSS. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take off any margin that might or might not be on the body, because that could mess up what we're doing here. And then I want to grab the page wrap. And for the purposes of this demo, I'm going to style the page wrap so that it features our buttons prominently on the page. And so let's give it a height of 100 viewport height. Let's display it as a flexbox container. And we're going to justify the content center. And we're going to align the item center. So that'll center it on the horizontal and vertical axis. And then let's grab the container. We're going to do something similar there. We're going to display it as a flex box. We want the flex direction to be a column. And I'm going to give it a height of like, let's say 50%. And then I'm going to say justify content space between. So we have some nice space between our buttons there. Okay, let's grab both the button and the button class, and let's start styling those. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to increase the font size so you guys can clearly see it. I'm just making it like a crazy big font size for the purposes of this demo. And let's give it a background color as well. And for that, I'm going to use the Adobe color. It's you can find it at color.adobe.com. I don't think this is a premium site. I think it's free. So go ahead and check that out. And I'm going to use this color that I've pre-selected here. Use this one right here. And let's go ahead and paste that in. And then I want to use a text color of white. And let's give this some padding. I always put my padding up here toward the top, which is where I like it. And so I'm going to give it like 20 pixels of padding and 10 pixels on the side. Looks better anyway. And I like to give my buttons a nice border radius. I don't know, maybe like 10 pixels. There we go. Just round off the edges a little bit. Okay, so let's grab the button element, and we're going to say border none on that because it comes in most browsers with default border around it. And for the button class, any anchor tags that have a button class on it, we want those to have a text declaration of none. So I grabbed an anchor tag, and by not including a space here and adding dot button, I'm saying I want text decoration none to apply to every anchor tag with the class of button. And so that's going to apply to this one, and it takes away that underline that comes as a default. I've also noticed, I think I'm just going to change the font family just so it doesn't look so bad, to Arial or sans serif. At least now it looks neutral. Okay, they're a little still not quite big enough for the purposes of this demo, so let's give them a min width of 200 pixels. And since we did that, we'll have to text align center. There you go. Okay, so now for the interactivity part of the button. When the user hovers over the button, particularly the button element here, nothing happens. When they click on it, nothing really happens. It does, the focus goes on the button, and so sometimes browsers like Chrome will add a little tiny blue border. But other than that, there's really no indication that the user is clicking this button. The button is very static and boring and not a very nice user experience. So that's what we want to fix. The first thing I'll show you is really, really simple. For both button elements and anything with a button class on it, I want to give it a cursor of pointer. And so when you hover over this button element now the cursor changes to a pointer, which indicates to the user that this is a clickable thing. And so that's kind of cool. So that's kind of the first real easy step to interactivity. The next thing we're going to do is when the buttons are active, we want to make it look like the button's being pressed. When a button is active, that means that the user is clicking down on the button. And so we want the button to actually look like it's going down. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to come back to Adobe. I'm going to grab the original color I used, except I'm going to turn the black level up here so that it appears darker. And I'm only going to go back a little bit because I really want this to be kind of a subtle effect. And we'll take a look at how that looks here. So when the button is active, we want the background color to change to a darker background color. So let's see what that looks like. Let's click here. See how it very subtly goes to a darker color. And what that actually does, just from a visual design perspective, it actually pushes it to kind of make it look like it's going down or going further back into the background, and like you're pushing it down. And that's because in the real world, an object that's reflecting light into your eyes that is closer is going to also appear brighter. And so you can kind of think of it as like a star in the night sky. It's, you know, the closer stars aren't always brighter because there's a lot of other factors that go into it, but a lot of objects in the sky are going to be brighter just by virtue of the fact that they're closer. And you know, if a star of the same size and same temperature and everything were further away, it would almost certainly be a darker star. And so what we want to do is we want to simulate the way that our users perceive objects on our page in the same way. So if this is a button and it really is being pressed down, then it is going to get a little bit darker. And so we want to kind of simulate that. for the user. And it's real subtle, and most users aren't even going to notice it, at least not consciously, but it's sort of that subconscious user friendliness, user experience kind of effect that we want to create. And so that's another one. So far we've changed the pointer so that, or the cursor so that it goes to a pointer over the buttons. And we've also caused the button to look like it's pushing back when we click on it. So that's kind of neat. Let's go ahead and let's exaggerate that effect by adding I'm going to add a box shadow. And this is what I do on my website at tylerduprey.com. I'm going to add a really subtle box shadow of 2 pixels. So this is, the first one is 2 pixels to the right. If I did 0 pixels, it would be on the right and the left, the shadow would be. And if I did -2 pixels, it would be to the left. And so I want to do 2 pixels to the right and then 2 pixels down. And then I want a blur radius of 3 pixels. And then I want that spread of that radius to be 3 pixels. And for the color, I'm just going to give it a medium gray color. As you can see, this has created a really subtle box shadow. And what it does is it kind of pulls the buttons away from the page and pushes them out like they're closer to us. And so, yeah, that kind of gives it the effect that it's forward and off of the page. And what we can do here is we can grab this box shadow rule, paste it down here into our active buttons, and I'm just going to give it a box shadow of none when it's active. And then you can see what happens here. When we push on here, on this button, the box shadow disappears and it physically looks like the button is being pushed into the page. And then that effect is exaggerated even more by the fact that the background color gets a little darker. So you can see how these two things we've done are now working together. And so that's really neat. So there you go. It looks like our buttons are being pushed into the page. And again, it's just like a nice, easy, quick user feedback that we can create. I'm going to do one more thing. I want to grab both the button and the button class, and I actually want to grab these on hover. I want to change the styling when we're hovering over these buttons, and I want to do the opposite of what we did before. I want these to actually get brighter on hover, and we'll show you what that looks like here. Let me go back into my original theme that I saved. So here's the original color I used for my buttons, and now I want to brighten them up a little bit. Not a lot. That's probably too much. Let's pull it back. Really subtle. We want to keep things subtle. I think new developers, or new designers anyway, tend to want to push things a little too far. So we want to keep these kinds of user, button changes very, very subtle. And so what we're doing here is when the user hovers over the button, we're actually giving it a brighter background color. And so you'll see what that looks like. This is just another way to show the user that this is a clickable button. When they hover over it, it changes state, almost asking the user to click it. At least that's the way I kind of look at it. It definitely brightens up when you scroll over it, and at the very least, or I shouldn't say scroll over it, when you hover over it. And at the very least, this is just going to show the user that this is an interactive element on the page and that the user can click on it. So that's all we've done there. So here are our interactive buttons. And these are the interactive buttons that I use on my site at tylerduprey.com. Okay, so hopefully you guys enjoyed that demo. Super simple, really easy one today. Hopefully you were able to follow along. I have a contact page on my website, so if you're viewing this demo from the website, be sure to reach out to me and let me know if you're enjoying the demos. Let me know if there's something else that I can show you. There's a lot more we can do with button interactivity, something that I'm going to spend an entire video on is what's called the ripple effect. And so it's this idea that when you press the button, the background color will actually ripple in a similar way that like water ripples when you drop a pebble into it. And so that actually comes from this idea called material design, which was released by Google in 2014. And it's just this, again, it's this idea that everything on the page is interactive. And so the ripple effect can be yet another way to make a button interactive. I didn't think it worked for my website, and so I used the technique that I showed you today. But it's definitely a cool technique, and I want to show you guys. So look out for that video. Otherwise, I hope you enjoyed the video, and happy coding.